Hola, hola. Bueno, ha costado un poco. Ha costado un poco, pero creo que vamos a poder empezar. Perdón por el retraso. Okay, there are some people here in that don't speak Spanish. Yeah, okay. I will try it in English. My English is not the best English. Yeah, no, yeah, yes. Okay. No, yeah. Okay, let's start this Symfony Barcelona event. Thank you everybody for coming here. I'm so proud to be here with more than 100 people. It's very good for me because I want to make all the community to share everything, and this is what we are doing right now. Okay, I want to introduce you to two persons, to our guests today. One of them is Matthias Novak. Most of you will know him. He's a very powerful man in PHP and Symfony 2. He will start in. Yeah, this is normal. This is Barcelona. And he will start his talk. The naked bundle. Maybe some of you have already seen the slides, pretty good. And then we will have Javier Aguiluz, that boy with our face. And well, he will introduce himself. I will introduce him later. So feel free. I have to turn off my phone because this is a regular mistake the speakers make. Yes. All right. And I also have to check if my remote control works. Yes, it works. Sometimes I have to try twice before. So you will see me doing this sometime. Can everybody hear me well also in the back? Yes? Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Cody, for bringing me over, inviting me to come and speak for you, the Symfony Barcelona user group. Very happy to see so many of you here. And I'm also very happy to just be in Barcelona. It's a beautiful city. I think many of you will agree with me on that. I'm here to talk about the naked bundle. And as Mark said already, maybe you know this idea already. Of course, I will explain all about it to you tonight. If you want to talk to me on the internet, the best way would be to send me a message on Twitter. This is my Twitter handle, so that is where you can find me. So yes, by now you might be wondering what is this all about, and maybe you have even Googled the naked bundle. Maybe you found some very interesting pictures for doing so. But one of the things that I encountered on the internet Googling for the naked bundle was something like this. It is a couple of books with very interesting titles. The Naked Earl, The Naked King, The Naked Gentleman. So a very interesting bundle of nice little books. I didn't read any of those, of course, but maybe I will someday. Anyway, thank you, Sally McKenzie, for being the first one to introduce naked bundles. But of course, bundles mean different things in the Symfony world. So you might recognize this structure. This is actually what a naked bundle looks like. Almost no files. Of course, you will have the conventional bundle class, but then there's not really much to this naked bundle anyway. There is a bit of configuration, there is a dependency injection extension, and maybe some configuration files like routing and service definitions. But that is really all there is to being a naked bundle. So I could have easily called it something different, like bundle light, and I should have trademarked that maybe. The no-code bundle. There's almost no code inside a naked bundle. Or maybe even the clean bundle, where the naked bundle is very easy to maintain. It contains almost no moving parts. It's really easy to work with. But yeah, naked was a little bit more catchy and somewhat controversial, so I picked that one. Until, in fact, Pierre came along, and he called this type of bundle not safe for work. So I think it's a really nice alternative. Okay, so let's take a look at the official view on bundles, just by looking at some parts of the documentation. This is not to point at some mistakes or be mad at documentation. In fact, Symfony has one of the best documentations of all frameworks out there. But just to mention how the official Symfony people write about bundles, what they are, and what they are to be used for. Let's take a look at this quote. Bundles are first-class citizens in Symfony, and I really like this word, first-class citizens. It means they are very important, of course. And a couple of lines below that. At the end of the day, your application code is just as important as the core framework itself. The idea is the framework itself consists of bundles too, so it's just as important. And I really don't agree with that. Your code is actually more important than the framework, which you might consider to be somewhat of an implementation detail. You should be able to switch frameworks just like you may switch databases. Well, we can discuss about that later, of course. Then there's something interesting about bundles is that they introduce the idea of reuse within Symfony land. And this is the way it's explained. This gives you the flexibility to use pre-built features packaged in third-party bundles or to distribute your own bundles. Really beautiful, so very nice. This is a great promise of reuse. But then on another page, the documentation says, well, each bundle is, of course, basically a directory containing some files, and each of the bundles in your application implements a particular feature. And then each of those bundle directories should contain everything related to that particular feature. For instance, PHP files, templates, style sheets, JavaScript tests even. And well, this basically contradicts the idea of reuse, or the promise of reuse that I think a bundle makes. Since basically, if you put everything in a bundle, then reuse will be easy, but only within the Symfony ecosystem. So if you would like to reuse part of your application in another ecosystem, for instance, the Laravel community would maybe like to use your bundle, then it wouldn't be possible since those systems don't support bundles or don't have a bundle system. So another thing that the glossary in this case says about bundles is that in Symfony, almost everything lives inside a bundle. This is what I already quickly mentioned. The framework itself consists of bundles, but this is not entirely true, since many things, many parts of Symfony don't live inside a bundle, they live inside components, inside libraries. So, yes, Symfony components are pure libraries too. They are not bundles or anything framework particular, framework specific. So, yes, as you may know, this is a good thing, and I think the Symfony developers have made a good choice because of this. But you probably already know that creating libraries, putting code in it, and having bundles that have only framework-specific things inside of it is a good thing. It's known as the libraries first approach. I guess this is somewhat of a common knowledge already. But when it comes to those very framework-specific things like controllers, entities, and templates, for instance, it feels like they really have to be inside a bundle, and they couldn't be inside a library. There's no point in trying to make them reusable or reusable outside of the Symfony application. But I think there is more to this. I think it should be totally possible to even extract those things outside the bundle into a library and make that library available for reuse. Not even within Symfony applications, but also in other types of applications. And so this talk, this night is all about this idea of extracting things from a bundle, putting them in something else, something different than a bundle, something out of a bundle. Don't get me wrong on this, I really love Symfony, I work with it every day. I even call myself a Symfony 2 developer, but I think it's really important to know exactly where your code is and where the framework's code is and what the exact touching points are between your code and the framework's code. So this is really more of an exercise in getting your coupling radar or coupling muscle into shape. Because I think that a framework is just a framework. So this is mainly a sentence you can use for anything, like a bar is just a bar. Of course, no, there are very important aspects of a bar that we will soon learn about. But anyway, I think a quick starter or a framework should be just a quick startup for a project. It should help you develop your projects faster, and you should be able to be working on the actual features very fast instead of thinking about how should I route the request to a controller or anything like that. That kind of things is the framework. That's what the framework does for you. A framework also prevents you from making big security mistakes again and again. So the framework has built a history of solving security issues, and you're likely not to make those mistakes again. And that's a good thing about frameworks. Also, there is a big community, of which you are, of course, an important part. And you, as a developer, can rely on that community to provide you with some answers to help you find your way in the Symfony then. So this is not only true for Symfony, of course, but also for any type of framework. But, okay, look, it's very important for you to notice the fact that I've emphasized you and your inside these characteristics of the framework, because I really think that the framework is there for you as a human being, as a developer. But at the same time, your code actually doesn't need a framework. That is something to keep in mind during this evening. And it strongly relates to one of my own principles, actually, the Noah's principle. Code shouldn't rely on something that it doesn't truly need. I always keep thinking this whenever I write some code. I think when I'm putting in some dependency, well, is this really necessary? Or when I'm following some kind of convention, is that really necessary? Couldn't I just write the code a little bit different and depend on nothing, or depend on other things, or depend on smaller things? That's a very interesting question to answer. Well, the interesting thing about bundles is that they come with a set of conventions. So things inside of a bundle often rely on being in some particular direction or having a particular name in order for them to work. But conventions aren't necessary at all. They are just convenient. You can follow them and be ahead of your competition quickly, but they are not necessary. And so when you follow my own principle here, you realize that code shouldn't rely on bundle conventions too, because it's not necessary to rely on them. You can also make things more explicit and do things in a more direct way, instead of relying on the framework's conventions. So yes, this is something I'm going to prove is possible tonight. Some conventions that you might know of already, or you may not have been aware of this before, but there are conventions like these. There are naming conventions. When you put something in a bundle and it should be a controller, then you give it the name something controller. And then inside of each of the controllers there are actions, of course, which are just public methods. But they have to be they have to have a name something action. And templates also, they follow naming conventions. They have to be in resources views. Then they have to be in a directory which the name is the name of the controller itself, and then each of the actions can or has a corresponding template called action.html.twig. Of course, it can be different if you are going to be more explicit, but then you will have to also write more code or be more explicit in your template annotation. So these are very well. I think everybody knows these naming conventions. And then there are some structural conventions, like each of the controller has to extend the framework's controller class, or at least if you try to move away from that, your controller at least has to be container aware, meaning that it gets the container injected in order for you to be able to fetch services from it directly. Then there are behavioral conventions, like the controller should be able to return an array, which will be used as template variables, of course. And well, actions can be, you can type in their arguments to objects, and then by some magical process, doctrine, for instance, will fetch objects from the database based on route parameters. So these are just some behavioral conventions that, well, you don't see them in your code. You can't see in the code what's really happening, but it works when you're in the Symfony application. So it's good to know about it. Well, and of course, lots of configuration conventions like use many annotations. This is actually part of the documentation of the SEO framework extra bundle, which is a good bundle, but well, as you can see, you will have lots of annotations. Well, this is more or less the Symfony convention. You are supposed to write or use lots of annotations. They are cool. Yes. Well, if you open an existing project, a Symfony project, and you look at the file structure, you look at the file names, you will immediately recognize the fact that this is a Symfony application. Oh, the sound just, okay, no, just continuing there. So when an application follows these conventions, you will immediately recognize it as a Symfony 2 application, which has some good sides on it, but also some bad sides. For instance, you might want your application to communicate more what the application is about, what you can do with it, instead of what framework you have used building it. So there are some things you have to do about. As you may know, last year I started working on this project more than a month with Symfony. Anybody knows what it became after that? Yes, nowadays it's called a year with Symfony. I had a lot of things to tell, and also I thought more than a month. Although I've been working for longer than that with Symfony, so it should be a year with Symfony. And again, I write this about the bundles. It becomes apparent that bundles are mainly treated as ways to extend the service containers, not as libraries of code. And this is something very interesting. As you may remember from the official view that I extracted from the documentation, bundles were supposed to contain all kinds of things necessary to implement one particular feature. But if you look at how Symfony handles bundles under the hood, then you will notice that it is really important for your code to be inside a bundle. And so a bundle mainly becomes a way to inject some services in the service container, or to have some configuration and turn that into well-configured services. But another very interesting characteristic of bundles is that they expose resources. So many files inside the bundle are available in other parts of the application because they are inside the bundle. A bundle is more of a namespace for resources. Well, many types of resources, of course. If you know about service definitions, they have to be inside the bundle. You know about controllers, they should be in a controller directory inside the bundle. Then routes, entities, any kind of things, any kind of these things that actually should be inside a bundle. But they should be inside the bundle because they become available like that. So you have these shorthand notations for finding something in the bundle. You say at name of the bundle, then slash resources views, etc. This works all over the place. This means that a bundle is basically a way to expose resources in your application. And later on, later during this talk, we will explore some other options to make resources available to all the parts of your application without resorting to bundles. Because there is really no need for them to be inside the bundle. There are several ways, or many ways, to make the connection between your application and the resources manually, instead of relying on the auto-registering bundle mechanism. The good thing of moving these kind of things outside of the bundle would be that they become more easily usable. It will be great for other communities, for other types of applications, to be able to use your Twig templates or to use your translation files without explicitly importing a whole bundle system or something like that. So reuse will be much easier. And, well, by doing so, by moving all these things outside of a bundle itself will become really very small. It contain a small. Sorry, can I do anything about this or? Okay? Yeah, no, I noticed that sometimes the sound drops. Let's try it. No. Yes? Okay, just continue. Okay, thanks. Just by moving all these things outside of the bundle, we can have really small bundles themselves. They will just be a little glue code between the framework you choose and your own code. And this will have some other main advantages, like we can have many parallel bundle-like packages for all kinds of different frameworks. So we can create a Laravel package which exposes your resources to a Laravel application. We can make Zen or Drupal modules, making your resources available in those type of applications. We can even write a KPHP plugin in case anybody wants to use that anymore. But the most important part is, even if you choose some kind of an old framework or maybe a very exotic framework, there is no problem in using your code and your resources in such application. It will just be a little effort to write this glue code to the application. So very nice. Yes, so the challenge in summary is to make the bundle as clean as possible, and to move all the things that don't necessarily belong inside the bundle outside. Put it in a library, maybe define some extra dependencies for those libraries, but let's agree not to depend on the Symfony framework bundle itself, since that will basically bring us back to square one and make us dependent on the entire framework itself. I am going to be quite realistic about this. Of course, there is something about reusability that there is a limit to it, and well, you can go further and further to remove all kinds of dependencies in your code and make your code reusable in any kind of situation, any kind of framework. That is a bit too much for me. I'm really more looking for reuse within the Symfony community itself. So I think that, or the Symfony, well, family. There are many applications, many frameworks out there that already use parts of Symfony, like HTTP Foundation, HTTP kernel. I think those are the most important Symfony components used in other applications. And I'm targeting those communities here today. So if you're about to write a Sonics application, then it should be just as easy as writing a Symfony application. Or the way you do this should be more or less the same. The same goes for Laravel, which has the same core components as the Symfony framework itself. So I hereby decide for all of you that we are going to allow a dependency on HTTP Foundation because of its request and response class, maybe some HTTP-related exceptions that we will need. And we are also going to rely on our application to contain some kind of an HTTP kernel, which converts a request object to a response object. Maybe you looked at this code before. It's a very clean, very easy interface, and it says basically to handle a request, I expect you to return a response. And, well, that's it. Of course, there's a whole big machine behind that, but it's basically as simple as that. So we are going to rely on this kind of a process to happen in the background. You might think at this point, why am I about to do this or about to explain this to you? It's because of these kinds of things. I often hear people say, well, let's rebuild this application, but this time, well, let's not use Symfony 2, but we are going to use Zen 4 because that's better, and well, our application will be much better if we use Zen 4 than Symfony 2. Of course, this will happen in a couple of years. Anyway, it's very likely that something like this will happen. I have heard many people say, why aren't you using Symfony 2? And in fact, you chose Zen 1, and that is outdated and don't do it. But well, this is going to happen all the time, of course. In a couple of years, that maybe even another framework has won the fight for application kingdom or something like that. Well, we are all going to move to Zest. That's totally possible, or Laravel even. I think Laravel is a big potential there. It is now already winning lots of developers for them because it's so very easy to build applications with it. So it's very likely that this is going to happen. But then you have a very good application running already, and you use then much outdated Symfony 2. Would you like to rewrite the application just to make it work with SN4 then? Maybe your application brings you a lot of money, and it will cost you a lot of money to rebuild that same application to use another framework. So I think it really is very interesting for those type of applications, long-lived applications, that you try to write your code as framework independent as possible. And then you will have to only rewrite maybe 5 or 10% of your code to use Zen4 instead of Zen2. So that is sort of an underlying mission here. But I think the most important reason why I talk about these kind of things is education. I think finding the exact touching points between you or your code and framework code, that will always be very helpful, very interesting to do, and it will make all of your applications better immediately. If you start doing this tomorrow, or maybe not quite make it bundles, of course, but just try to be aware of all the touching points between your code and your dependencies. Because, well, there's something, I quickly mentioned this, there is something like a coupling radar. As a developer, you really need one of those. They are not for sale, you have to develop them yourselves in your mind. As you can see, this is a coupling radar, and it has several arrows pointing to actual dependencies. So the coupling is about dependencies, and your coupling radar is about trying to find out what are the exact dependencies of your code. You need to be aware of everything that your code relies on in order to work. So there are explicit dependencies, like when you include a file, or you use a function, or a class. But those are quite easy. Of course, you can just scan a bit of code, a piece of code, and recognize what are the exact dependencies of that piece of code. But there are also implicit dependencies, like maybe a file has to be in a particular location in order to work, or a file has to be named in a particular way, or a class or methods for that matter, or the return value of a function should have a particular structure. Maybe it should be an array with 2 keys. Who knows? All kinds of implicit dependencies here, and you have to be aware of those too. So, in particular, when you're talking about Symfony and writing Symfony applications, keep looking for ways in which your code actually depends on some kind of a convention or a hidden dependency. That will make you better developers. I think the stronger your coupling radar becomes, the better developers you will become. So. Yes, well, that was the theoretical part, and we are going to now take a look at the practical part of this. So there we go. We are going to move the controller, this controller, outside of the bundle. And yes, so we are going to look for dependencies here, and we are going to extract them or remove them entirely. As you can see, this controller extends the framework controller, and just by looking at the uses at the top of this page, you can see that this controller is part of a bundle. And so, in any type of application that doesn't have a bundle structure, this will not work. We won't be able to just use a bundle like the Symfony framework extra bundle. And yeah, so we are going to move away from that. Also, this uses annotations. These annotations introduce some kind of, well, not really magic, of course, because everything in programming is not magic. It is written somewhere, it happens somewhere, so you will be able to find it in the Symfony code, of course. But we are also not going to rely on this, because probably these annotations won't work in other applications that don't have this extra bundle installed, or don't use the kernel event listeners that are necessary to all kinds of these things. So yes, our to-do list is to not rely on things that may not be there in another context. So we are going to remove the dependency on the parent controller class, and we are going to remove any annotations that we use. And this is the beautiful result. We have a very nice and clean controller. Of course, this isn't very useful at all. So we have to take a look at what is actually going on inside this controller. The usual stuff, actually. We are going to fetch the doctrine service and get the entity manager from it. We're going to do some querying there, and if something is not found, we throw this create not found exception. Oh, sorry, I had some nice arrows to come with this. We use a request object, which is an important thing. But I allow this, of course, because HTTP Foundation is an explicit dependency of our code, so it's just fine. But we use a service controller. It is available as, well, it is automatically injected in the previous example, but right now it isn't, because our controller here is not container aware. We use this helper function from the parent controller class, and we rely on some kind of an event listener to convert the return value of the controller to an actual render template. Yes, so what are we going to do? We are going to rewrite this controller to make use of dependency injection. We are not going to use any of the helper methods from the parent controller class. We are going to render the template manually, just some extra work here. And we are going to keep using the request objects, which is not really a to-do since we are just going to leave it. The first thing, injecting dependencies, I am sure you all know about this. It looks just like this. Just say what you want in the constructor and store it as a private variable. Then, to prevent the use of the parent controller's helper functions, we're just going to inline them. So we are going to throw a not found HTTP exception whenever we want. Yeah, so we don't have to rely on those parent functions. They are most of the time very easy anyway. Yes. So rendering a template manually is a bit more work. We need to inject another dependency, the templating engine. We need to wrap the rendered template inside a response object. But then the same array that we previously used as return for the controller can still be used as an array of template variables. So it's very nice. There's one big problem here. We are still using a bundle name here. We are importing edit.html.twig template file from my bundle. This won't be possible inside an application that doesn't have a bundle structure, so or a bundle system. But we will address this issue later, of course. There are a good solution for this, so we'll see. Now, what have we gained at this time? There are no mentions of bundles anywhere, except for the template reference, of course, but we don't use any class or thing that is inside a bundle. That's great. We only use explicit classes and interfaces from components, from libraries. But if we do this for each and every controller in our application, we will easily reach something like dependency overflow. Since every controller class has multiple actions, and each of those actions uses different dependencies. If we are not going to use the service container inside the controller, we will have to convert that to constructor arguments, and then we will end up with long lists of just like these. Well, the thing is, what is the cause of this? Really, it is convention again. So somehow we have learned that each controller should have many actions, or can have many actions. We are usually arranging our actions like that. We can choose one concept, like a blog post or a participant or a meeting as an entity, and that entity has several actions on it. So, well, of course, we just convert them to actions inside the same controller. But I think that one action per controller would be just fine. It would be even better. It would look something like this. We have inside our controller directory another directory called article, which was previously the name of the controller. And now each of the actions is just a class, controller class. It can have only the right dependencies. It doesn't have a long list of dependencies, only just a couple, only used inside this controller. And you can use the __ invoke magic methods used to actually run objects or call objects as if they were functions. So that's very easy and very clean too. The good thing is that your directory structure will look very clean, and it will immediately tell you everything you can do with an article. So instead of looking inside the controller class, you will recognize well, all the things that, that can be done with an article. As you may have noticed, we just removed routing annotations and templating annotations. We have to find a way to reintroduce them. Or not the template annotations, we are actually rendering the template manually. But we also have to make sure that the right services are injected. We cannot rely on the container to be injected. So we have to make sure that there are service definitions for our controller. And of course, it's very easy. Just like you may know already, probably you use YAML, of course, for service definitions. But I'm a big fan of XML because it's very strict. I like things to be strict, as you may know from reading my articles. But one of the good things is that if you use PHP Storm, then you will have some nice auto-completion for XML, and you won't make mistakes that you sometimes only notice when your project is already deployed on the server. So that's very nice, and this is what it looks like to prepare the article controller for use in the application. As you may notice, there is the edit article controller service ID, and we need this in our routing file. It looks like this. The route mentions the edit article controller service, and it says when you are going to execute this controller, you have to call its __ invoke method. Again, very clean. Of course, you will have lots of service definitions like this, but there's no problem in having many service definitions because you won't notice them anyway. They are only part of the configuration, so it's good. Also, Kevin Bond made a pull request for Symfony 2.6. I think it has been merged already, allowing you to leave out this __ invoke part, meaning that any service object that is really invocable, you can just mention the service ID, and then it will run just as if you invoked. Very nice. Okay, so what have we achieved with regard to controllers? Well, they can be anywhere now, because they are part of the service definition. We can put the class anywhere. That is already a very nice thing. But there is also no need to have a particular naming convention there. Also, no actions named action, which I like very much. I like to be free in that way. We also use dependency injection, which is very good on itself, and no service location anymore, which will make your dependencies even more explicit than they were. And the big achievement here is that we will be able to use this controller in any type of application that uses HTTP Foundation. So that is a big achievement in my opinion. We can just easily move this controller to a SciEx application for it. Very nice. Well, next up are entities, of course. Entities are known as things that have to be inside the bundle, but they don't have to be, of course. These are just some of the conventions. We put them in the entity directory of the bundle, and we use annotations to provide some mapping data for them. But, well, what's wrong with annotations? Well, they somewhat make your application, make your code less portable than usual. So if you use annotations, you won't be able to use it in other applications that don't use annotations or that don't use, or that do use annotations but don't have Doctrine ORM installed in this case. Because what is going to happen? Annotations are classes. Really, just like you can see inside this code, you have to use a certain namespace, and you pay as ORM. And only then can you use the annotations because they are classes. This is the code that is usually used to parse annotations. well, you use the doctrine annotation reader, you create an instance of it, you create a reflection class instance of the entity class, and then you ask the reader to actually fetch the class annotations for the particular class. Now, this is what is going to happen in an application that doesn't have Doctrine ORM installed, but is still trying to use to read the annotations from the particular class. Because what does it say? Class Doctrine ORM mapping column is not found. And of course, yes, if you don't have Doctrine ORM installed, it will not be found, and the annotations won't be parsable. So using annotations in this way makes your less portable, or even non-portable. And the funny thing is that on Twitter, Stan Diamond asked me, well, yes, well, he didn't use exactly my words in this case, but he said, well, yes, but you can go this far, but are you not going to use anything else than Doctrine ORM? I mean, are there really any alternatives for Doctrine ORM that do the same thing? Of course, there are active record alternatives to Doctrine ORM, but are there any good tools that just take a plain class, it doesn't have to extend anything, and persist objects of the type? Well, maybe, I don't know. If anybody has a suggestion, it would be nice. But you always have to take care of situations where people use Doctrine MongoDB OEM or CouchDB OEM or any of the other flavors that are around. The Doctrine supports in the same way as it supports annotations for the Doctrine ORM. When using MongoDB, it's very easy to define a field instead of a column. It works just in the same way. But now, if someone would have all these types of annotations in their class, they would also have to install all of these persistence libraries at the same time without even using them. So it's basically, if you're targeting your code to be very reusable and don't use, but you don't have to use annotations since there are good alternatives there. Yes, well, of course we have to remove that, but we also have to find another way. This is our to-do list. And well, when we first remove those annotations, we end up with a really clean, code. It's a Java word. They say plain old Java object, or PHP is plain old PHP objects. There's nothing in here that tells you that this is going to be persisted using Doctrine ORM, which is very nice on itself. But well, the good thing about Doctrine is that it also provides you with other options to map your data to the database. This is what mapping XML looks like for Doctrine. You can define an entity class, you can define the fields, just the same way as you did with the annotations, but even better, since again, if you have an editor which supports this kind of thing, you will have auto-completion, and you will never make the mistake of forgetting about inverse by or map by or any of those interesting things. So yes, it will be much easier to write your mapping metadata in this way. Actually, this already works for an out-of-the-box Symfony application using the standard edition. The convention is just if you have an entity in your bundle, it's called article, then you have to put the XML metadata for it at this location. So inside the bundle, resources from the Doctrine, you have a file article, which is the name of the entity, .orm.xml. And then Doctrine will automatically load the metadata for you. But as you may have guessed, oh, there it goes again. As you may have guessed, I want to put this metadata not inside the bundle, but outside the bundle, which will make this metadata reusable for other users that don't have the bundle system. So let's try this. There's a nice little trick, and you would have to install the Doctrine bundle, and you would have to install it in an unstable version, really. As far as I know, it hasn't been released as a one version, but you can include it in your composer file using until the 1.3 and def. And then you will have a very nice tool. It's called Doctrine ORM mapping class. Inside your bundle, you can register a compiler class. It is, well, this is just, I've introduced a little helper function for it. You provide the XML path. So this path can be anywhere, it doesn't have to be inside the bundle. You provide the namespace prefix for those entities that you describe in those XML files. And then you create the mappings class, or the compiler class, by using a static method XML mapping driver. And you provide an array of key value pairs where the key is the XML path, and the value is the namespace for the entities that you are going to describe in those XML paths, which is very great. It's a way to really decouple your Apple method. Two at the same time. Not someone from the audience calling. Okay. Okay. All right. So this is very interesting. Of course, I will link somewhere, or the Symfony Barcelona organizers will link somewhere to the slides, so you can just copy this code in your project. It will be very easy. Now, the new convention, of course, would be to, in this particular example, to describe entities in my library mobile article using XML files in source my library.tree. It sort of is the same as you did when describing it from inside the bundle, but now, of course, it can be anywhere, which is part of the effort that I'm trying to make. So what have we achieved right now? Entity classes can be anywhere. Just because the mapping metadata can be anywhere, the entities can be anywhere too. So it's just a matter of moving them to a library and, just changing the class names in the mapping metadata. Very nice. The metadata itself can also be anywhere, and it can also be in any different formats. So Doctrine supports YAML too, and it also supports PHP. So just pick one and it will be good. And very important, entities are true propos. They don't tell you anything about how they are being persisted in test days. So very nice. Well, finally, we are going to arrive at templates. So I started with a list of things that have to be in a bundle: controllers, templates, entities. And templates are the last ones actually. Their naming convention is, actually, you may remember, resources views the name of the controller, and then the file names inside those directories should be actioned or formatted engine. Usually, of course, it's format HTML and engine twig, but well, you can switch between PHP, the PHP engine, and of course, different formats can as well be JSON. But the big difficulty with templates, of course, I want to move them out, just like I did with the other things. But the difficulty with templates is they have all kinds of dependencies that are very implicit. And well, for instance, global variables are implicit or maybe even explicit dependencies, but they are hard to get rid of. So using a global variable like app.request in your template is a way of coupling your template file to your entire application, saying, I need this to be a Symfony application, and I need it to have this global variable. In other systems, it's very likely that app.request is not available. So if you want to write decoupled templates, don't use global variables. But the same goes for functions. Functions have to be registered before you're going to render the template. And it's very likely that in other applications, things like path don't exist. Well, path is a bit of a difficult example because most other applications that use Twig as a templating engine also support path. But there are many other functions that have to be registered before you can use them, and you may never know if that has happened. There is no dependency file for templates where you say, oh yes, I need this function, I need this global variable, etc. One other difficulty with templates is that they include or extend or embed templates that are located entirely different places. So once you extend from the super global base.html.twig file, yes, if you move this template to another application, it's very likely that there is not such a thing as a column base.html.twig file. It's very likely, it's only likely in Symfony applications, but even then, you might never know if you're going to include something that does exist or not. So, very difficult, but of course, if you write the templates in a decoupled way, which would be an entirely different talk, by the way, but if you do this, yes, it should be possible to move them out. Yes, just like I said. There is something called twig namespaces, and you can register a new namespace just in your config or demo file. You have the key twig path, and then you say, well, I want to register a template namespace. You can find it here. It's just an absolute path to my templates. And I want them to be available under the name my library. And inside your controller, you can automatically use this notation. You say, I want to render a template, and you can find it here at my library /template.html.twig. And this means that Twig will look inside this absolute path and will try to find the template file right there. So if it exists, it just works out of the box in this way. The problem is here, absolute paths. So if you're going to make your templates reusable or make them available for other application types, then, well, of course, this isn't going to work because probably they have no config or YAML file with a Twig key. But more importantly, you are asking your users to register a Twig namespace themselves. So you would really want this to happen automatically to make those template files automatically available whenever they install your package. There's some good news there. Bernard Schusek, you might know him. He has created many parts of Symfony. I think it's mostly used for forms, but also validation, translation, the internationalization component, and probably many more parts of Symfony. But he has also created Puli, and it is a library which helps you with exactly this problem. It allows you to well, sorry. Yes, I'm just going to show you, right? It's better. Puli basically converts relative paths to absolute paths. So you won't ever need to tell the user to point to an absolute path when they want to make resources available. So what Puli does is it offers a resource repository, just an instance of a very simple class, and then you can add, for instance, a prefix, just like the Twig namespace. This is just a prefix. So you say, I want to use /my library /views, and whenever I use this relative path or prefix path, I want you to replace that with absolute path to views. Right? So the absolute path is right in the second part, and the relative part or the namespace part is in the left part. So when you write this, you want actually to resolve index.html.twig to the actual location. So this is what really happens when you ask the repository to get the absolute path of this template file, /my library /use /index.html.twig. It should resolve to the absolute path, and it does because, well, that's what Puli does. Most of the time, it's really just a simple string replacement, so it should be just very easy to understand this idea. But it's very powerful, especially if you use it in combination with the Puli Composer plugin. And this is very wonderful stuff. Now, instead of manually registering prefixes which point to absolute paths, you can just put those things in a Composer JSON file, which can be the Composer JSON file of one of your packages or of your project. So whenever you have a library or a package containing templates, you just say in its Composer JSON file, I have some resources for you. They should be prefixed /my library /views, and you can find them in my source, my library views directory. And this directory is relative to the root of the package itself. And again, just using this Composer plugin, Puli will resolve those paths automatically for you. So very nice. If you use it for Twig templates, you can say, yes, I have this resource. The prefix is my library /views, and resolve this to source my library /views inside my package. If the user has enabled the Puli Twig extension, then they can just use something like this in their code, in their controller. They can say templating render this template /my library /views /index.html.twig, and Puli will automatically resolve this relative path or this prefix path to an absolute path inside the package, which is great because you don't know, as a user of package, you don't know where resources are. The package just registers those files itself. Very cool. And there are many possibilities for this. So you can have the templates inside a separate package, but you can also have translation files in a separate package. You might even re-release your translation files to other communities, other application types. You can have the mapping metadata in a separate package, saying, yes, I have some metadata for you. Service definitions even. Maybe your package could automatically register service definitions and make those services available in the service container, which would skip the bundle as a service container extension file. Very interesting ideas. And so on, really. There are so many options here. If you just think about it, well, you could expose any kind of resource in your package and make it available in an application that has GUI. Very good. So yes, I think the future is bright. Even though GUI is not stable yet, it is almost stable. It is in an alpha release. So it should be very probable that this is going to be released one day. I expect very much from this. Really, GUI will be the ultimate tool to create what I like to call naked bundles. It basically allows you to move anything outside of a bundle and expose that thing that you would move outside of the bundle to the application, just like a bundle did before. But, sorry, the most important thing is that GUI will help us share things that we create between different communities, different framework developers. And you might say that even this will allow us to share our resources or our files across language barriers. So this isn't limited to PHP. There might as well be a GUI implementation for other languages, and then you can have your package installed in another project and make your resource available to that project. Very interesting thoughts. But even without GUI, there are so many things you can do to make your code not rely on the framework. To move things outside of the bundle, there are so many options. But you can also leave things inside the bundle and still make them decoupled. There's no there is a little more effort if you really want to move those things outside the bundle. But your code will already become much better if you know the exact touching points between your code and the framework. So I don't tell you to create naked bundles tomorrow already, maybe just as an experiment, but you can still try to create decoupled code, right? This is a good exercise anyway. So remember, the framework is for you. Your code doesn't need it, right? So it is a personal thing. It is also why people are so angry about frameworks or so happy about their own. But the code doesn't really care which framework it uses or you use. Well, we've come to the point that you may ask me some questions about all of this, which has been a lot, I think. So, yes.
Thank you for the thing. Sorry, it is working. I have another micro here, but I don't know
That's a good idea.
No, it's a good idea if the micro is working.
If it works, otherwise I will walk to it. Okay. Even if I turn it off, or
Hi. So thank you for this demonstration. It's very interesting. I'm not so convinced by the way you put your entities inside the bundle, because I may misunderstood that I believe you introduced the dependency on the doctrine bundle, right? And doctrine bundle which have its own dependencies like doctrine. So finally, we are dependency on doctrine or probably on some orchestra bundle. I don't know. I have to see. So
Thank you. Thank you. About the dependency on doctrine that we may have introduced. Let's get this back. Yes, okay. We didn't really introduce a dependency on the doctrine bundle. We did somewhat introduce a dependency on doctrine ORM as a library. But I think this is fine. You'll always have a choice of library that you want to depend on. But we don't need to necessarily depend on doctrine ORM on its own. I think in most cases it would be possible to actually depend on the common persistence library for doctrine. And so you would make your code easily usable with other doctrine flavors, which is already quite useful in my opinion. Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes?
Are you comfortable just speaking loud? Because I have kind of trouble with that one.
Okay.
There's no secret with that kind of thing.
Okay. Hi, firstly, I have to congratulate you for the talk. It was pretty awesome. And I want to ask you one question. It's all about this talk is based on the premise that you use your framework as a bootstrap tool or something like that. It's okay. It's a fair deal. But what about maybe transformations in terms of formularies? When you have a form and you have this tool in Symfony called transformations and so on, what about that inside this kind of naked schema or something like that?
All right. The question is, what if you're going to use forms? Well, are you going to decouple from that too? I think. No, because the form component is very useful on its own. You can just use it as a dependency in your library. I don't think it's possible to, if you use Symfony forms, to find a layer of abstraction between that. That's would be too much work, I think, or it wouldn't also be worth it. I think it totally makes sense if you want to reuse a controller that uses a form inside an application. Well, just also install the form. It's just it should be very easy. Yeah. Thanks.
I wonder if it's not dangerous to go that way, because really what the framework gives you is convention over configuration normally.
Yeah.
And here you're doing the exact, and you're introducing a lot of configuration, getting rid of all the conventions. So I would go around that.
Is this a dangerous thing to do, or a bad direction, maybe, to move away from convention over configuration and prefer configuration over convention? Well, it is interesting because Symfony itself has a strong configuration over convention history, or at least Symfony 2 has. And so I think Symfony, or the official view, or the creator of Symfony, are moving back to like more convention over configuration. This is because many people will have trouble trying to find their way using just configuration and writing lots of code. So one good example about which I'm sure Javier is going to speak in a couple of minutes is the Symfony Best Practices book that has been released as a preview. It shows you basically that that when you're going to start using Symfony, it's best to rely on all those conventions and use anything that is considered tradition, or no, not tradition, but a good practice, a best practice, to get you started, to get you moving quickly towards implementing features, which is at the end of the day what we are all trying to do, of course. So, so yes, it is a dangerous way, and I'm not telling you to do this. I am basically merely telling you to be aware of any kind of things that you depend on, any convention that you follow that may not be necessary. Also, I must say that I have used naked bundles in one application. It's a very beautiful application, at least in my opinion, though it is not used by anyone. So yes, this is somewhat academical, of course, philosophical, maybe even theoretical, and I'm sure that it is totally possible to write good applications, to have teams that follow these kinds of ideas. But I think most teams, most projects would benefit from following more conventions than configuring everything. Even though I must say that it doesn't take much more time to do so, it even makes you a better developer in a way. But who knows? There is always a point in time where where it's only suitable to take these kind of steps. But then just try to find, just maybe by some intuition, by programmer's intuition, when it's the right time to do these things and when it's not. So, thank you. So that's it. Yeah. Oh, I have a few slides towards the end. Just not very like informational stuff, but a bit of commercial messages, of course. So, this sounds to me like all the naked bundle stuff is boring to you. No problem. I have made a link for you in the slides using which you can buy my book for even less money than usual. Also, I'm working on the second book about package design, which might interest you. Again, you can get a quite reasonable discount to it. If you want to talk to me, like in person, of course, I would be happy to. On Twitter, you can find me there. Thanks to Sarah McKenzie for the bundle images, and that's it.
Hola. Okay, I'll start to continue for this for the people. Please just please. Javier Aguiluz told us about this book, Best Practice, just a week ago. And during this talk, we will raffle. It will be in Spanish, so I'm sorry for the people that don't speak Spanish. Just try to imagine the words. Okay, just 1 minute. Just 1 minute. Yeah. Okay. During this talk, we will raffle 2 books of mathematics. Dedicated. I don't know if the word is good in English, but it's okay. We will raffle 2 books from Matthias Novak for our assistants today. We will raffle also 2 licenses of PHP Storm. JetBrains is the Corona sponsor. I expect one of that, so we'll raffle also 2 PHP Storm. We will raffle Symfony shirts provided by Essence Labs, and we will raffle also. We will raffle myself. We will raffle some t-shirts of Autoli. If some of you already know, Elko is a company which I'm working with some guys here. We are sponsoring this event, so at the end of the day, it will be some food for us, for everybody. And what we are doing is Symfony e-commerce, everything related to Symfony e-commerce. So And just if you want, take a look at our code and we want lines, and that's it. So, en español, que habéis ayudado para un aplauso.